Welcome to another wonderful Susanna Calloway audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean Western romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Susanna Calloway, Western romance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. The Unavailable Christmas Bride. Chapter 1. James Fletcher was tired to the bottom of his bones. With every bump and rattle of the wagon over the rocky road, he could hear the quiet clinking coming from the box in the wagon behind him. It made him smile, despite the exhaustion that was sucking at the backs of his eyes. The delicate china inside was carefully padded with sawdust. Of course, there were some other supplies back there, too, the few things that he and Emma couldn't produce from their ranch: sugar and coffee beans and salt. Emma knew he was coming with supplies. But she didn't know how long he'd been saving to buy her a good set of china like she'd been secretly wanting for years, and James couldn't wait to see her face when he arrived home. "Get up," he ordered softly. "Come on." The younger of the two cart horses drawing the wagon, a bright bay, tossed its head restlessly, pulling hard against its collar. The elder just snorted and swished its tail, knowing full well that James wasn't going to get after him. The horses had traveled a long road today, and James didn't blame them for feeling tired. "Sorry," he told them out loud. "I'm just excited to get home to the missus." Without warning, the bright bay horse stuck out all four its legs as straight as bedposts and stopped dead. James had to move quickly, grabbing for the brake to avoid running over his own horse with the wagon's momentum. "Billy," he scolded, shaking the reins. "What are you thinking?" Billy was as frozen as if he'd been made of stone. He let out a ripping snort, and James sighed in frustration. "Fool youngster," he snapped, touching the older horse with the whip. "Tell this young idiot to get going, Washington." But Washington was as frozen as his counterpart. He chomped the bit and pawed at the ground but refused to move a step further. James frowned. He climbed down from the driver's seat and walked around to the horses' heads, petting their muzzles. He knew they would move on if he whipped them, but he also knew it was worth paying attention to what they were telling him. "What's frightening you?" he murmured. "There's got to be something out there to make you behave like this." He glanced back toward the wagon, where his shotgun lay under the seat. "Wolves? Mountain lions? Injuns?" James shook his head at himself. Not that those sorry folks would want to attack a white man, not with the way those dang fools back in the fort at Santa Fe keep shooting at M for no good reason. He shaded his eyes, gazing out across the barren landscape. There was nothing but sand and sagebrush and rocks in all directions, the horizon shimmering under a harsh mirage. Wait. There, in the mirage. James squinted, trying to make out whether he was seeing rocks and a dust devil or an Injun village, he muttered, hurrying back onto the driver's seat. "And it's on fire. Those fool soldiers." He snapped the whip. "Hiya." Trusting the urgency in James's voice, Washington and Billy plunged forward at a brisk trot, the fastest that James dared to drive them over the rocks. He steered the horses as well as he could, glancing up intermittently as the village began to take shape ahead of him, and with every detail he saw, his heart sank lower. The flames still licked at the edges of a last grass hut, exposing its charred wooden skeleton. A single, lame cow hobbled hopelessly from one empty water trough to the other. And the bodies. Blood pooled around them, their chests blown wide with bullet holes, their feathers broken, war paint smudged, eyes glassy and sightless. "What happened here?" James murmured, reining his horses to a halt beside the first grass hut as he stared in horror at the remnants of the village. He received no answer, but he didn't need to. He knew what had happened to these people, and it made him sick to his stomach. But there was nothing he could do here. Nothing lived except for that cow and the blue-bellied flies that buzzed around the corpses. Horrific as this was, James would have to move on, even though it left a bitter taste in his mouth. What could one man do against all that hate? He was just turning the horses away when he heard the sob. It was a tiny, quiet, suffocated sound, and he froze, wondering if he'd imagined it. Surely, nothing could be left alive in this village. Could it? Then it came again, and James knew he'd heard it, the quiet whimpering of a frightened child. The very thought of a child being in this place of death made his heart hurt. He pulled up the brake and jumped down from the wagon again, heading toward the half-burned hut nearest to him. "Hello?" The sobbing stopped. Inside the hut, there was a quiet scraping noise. James cautiously peered into the shadows. It was smoky within, the roof still smoldering, but he could just make out a pair of glittering eyes staring at him from the furthest wall. Blinking, James stepped inside. His eyes adjusted to the darkness, and he could see her plainly, a tiny girl, no more than 4 or 5 years old, huddled up against the wall of the hut. A buckskin cloak had been tucked around her little body, and she pulled it up to her chin, pure terror filling her eyes as she stared at him. "It's all right," said James softly, crouching down. He held out a hand to the little girl. "I'm not going to hurt you." He knew she probably couldn't understand a word he was saying. Making his tone as soothing as when he spoke to his own little boy, he tried again, this time in the Apache language. "I'm here to help you," he said. "What's your name?" Surprise flitted across the little girl's face. She shrank back a little more. "But you're a white man," she whispered, her voice high and hoarse. "They hurt my mother." "I know they did," said James, his heart shattering. "But I won't hurt you. Won't you tell me your name?" Her chapped lips parted. "Bina," she whispered. "Well, Bina," said James, "you can't stay here. There's nothing here for you." He held out his other hand. "Come with me. Let me take care of you." She hesitated for a moment, but she must have read the compassion in his eyes. She scrambled to her feet, still clinging to the cloak, and rushed toward him. Her tiny, fragile body smelt of smoke and blood in James's arms, and he scooped her up, cradling her against his chest as he rose. "It's all right, now," he whispered. "You're going to be just fine. You're coming home with me." He sighed inwardly as he walked back to the wagon, the little girl tucked against his chest. Emma was going to be exasperated, of course. But she'd understand. The rest of the townsfolk, probably not so much. Chapter 2. Levi Fletcher knew that it wasn't proper for a grown man to cry the way that he was doing now, but he couldn't help himself. The tears rushed down his cheeks of their own accord as he stared down at the gravestone. "I can't believe you're gone, Pa," he whispered, wiping away a tear self-consciously, even though there was no one here to see him. Pa had been buried in the orchard behind the ranch house, in his favorite spot. Only the twisted limbs of the apple trees witnessed Levi's grief. He swallowed hard, kneeling down to rest a hand on the fresh earth of the grave. "Santa Fe never loved you, Pa, but you tended the people anyway. They judged you so harshly because of Ma, but you never let that stop you from being the doctor that they needed." He rubbed his temples, trying to hold back his tears. "What will they do without you? What will I do without you?" Soft footsteps on the grass interrupted Levi's one-sided conversation. He turned to see his mother heading toward him. Her tan face was wrinkled as a walnut, but her 2 long braids were still jet black. "It's getting cold out here, son," she said, laying a hand on his shoulder. "Time to get inside for dinner." "I miss him, Ma," said Levi softly. Bina crouched down beside him. Her fingertips brushed the gravestone, touching the words, "Jim Fletcher," as if she could somehow feel her husband through them. "Beloved wife and father," the rest of the gravestone read, "to Bina Fletcher and Levi Fletcher. We will always miss him," she said. "But he is with Jesus now." Levi struggled to smile. "He once told me that the only way he'd ever leave you was to go and be with the only one he loved more than you," he said. "He's safe and happy now," said Ma. "It amazed me to the very day that he died that he never considered leaving me. I made him an outcast because of my Apache heritage." "He loved you," said Levi. "All the judgment in the world could never have made him leave you. I was very blessed to have known him ever since I was a little girl, and your grandfather brought me home to raise me alongside your father as if I was his own child," said Ma, As if Levi didn't already know the story well. He was a brother to me, then a best friend, and then something more. I don't remember a time without him. A sigh of longing escaped her. But come. Let's go inside. I have something for you. Levi allowed himself to be led back to the double-storied ranch house that took its stand with the canyons behind and the prairie in front. Dusk was falling, and Ma had already lit a lamp in the kitchen. As Levi stepped inside, its light illuminated a bright white envelope lying in the middle of the table. It was crisp and new, and Levi's heart flipped as he recognized his father's handwriting. Levi, it said simply. Your father left this for you, said Ma. She slid the envelope toward him. He told me to give it to you when he was gone. Levi felt tears welling up behind his eyes. He tried to hide them, sitting down by the table and gently opening the envelope. The letter was written in his father's careful scrawl. Son. If you're reading this, it means that I am gone. Don't be sad for me. I know you will miss me, but I am with the God I served all my life, and my joy is perfect at last. I have known since you were a little boy that you have a heart for helping people, just like I do, and like my father did. That is why I leave you this letter. Santa Fe needs a doctor, and without me, they don't have one. I've taught you everything I know. You can be a brilliant doctor, the person they need to care for them. I know you fear that they will continue to reject you because of the color of your skin. But my son, I know that your heart can win them over. I believe you can mend so much more than runny noses and broken bones. You can mend the heart of a town torn by prejudice. You are my greatest legacy. Please, consider what I ask. You know that I love you. Pa. Levi looked up at his mother, his eyes brimming with tears. Did he tell you about this? He did. Ma slipped an arm around his shoulders. And I think he's right, Levi. You can heal this town in more ways than one. Levi shook his head. I can never be Pa, he whispered. Those shoes are much too big to fill. With man, it is impossible, said Ma. But with God, all things are possible. Levi said nothing. Ma's faith came so easily to her, but he had seen the hate in the townspeople's eyes. He could never be the doctor they needed. No, not that one, you imbecile. Luella Ramsey shrieked at the top of her lungs. Does that look like teal to you? Amanda Russell froze, looking at the gown she was about to take out of Luella's wardrobe. Yes, she ventured. That's not teal at all. Luella threw her elegant hands up into the air in exasperation. It's aquamarine, you fool. Aquamarine. Bring me the teal one. Amanda bit her lip to hold back the tears as she replaced the gown and riffled through the others. She selected one that seemed identical in color and pulled it out, keeping her eyes on the floor to avoid Luella's wrath. This one? Finally. Luella snorted. How long could it possibly take to find a single gown? Amanda said nothing as she brought the gown over to the other side of the room and hung it on a hook behind the screen. Luella leaned closer to the mirror of her vanity, carefully dabbing her cheeks with powder. What are you standing around there for, you stupid girl? She demanded. Come on. Brush my hair. And hurry up. Sorry, Luella, Amanda whispered. It's Miss Ramsey to you, said Luella icily. Amanda decided it was safer just to nod. She picked up a brush from the vanity and let Luella's flowing brunette locks down so that they poured across her shoulders in silken profusion. Working the brush through the shiny curls, Amanda thought back to a time when she'd called the angry young woman at the vanity Lou. They'd run up and down the hallways of the Philadelphia mansion together, climbed trees together, gotten into trouble together. They'd been all but sisters as Amanda's mother worked as Luella's governess. Ouch! Luella howled. What are you doing back there, girl? Trying to rip my brains out? And no. Sorry, Lou, Miss Ramsey, Amanda stammered. Ugh. It's at times like these that I miss your mother, Luella spat. At least she knew something, unlike you. I can't imagine why my silly father offered you a job as my maidservant after your mother died." Amanda stared at Luella's eyes in the mirror, trying to detect a trace of feeling, but there was nothing except a cold, vain glitter. Ma had practically raised Luella, but now the young woman was talking about her like she'd been just another servant. She'd almost finished brushing out Luella's hair when the young woman gave a terrible shriek. Amanda nearly jumped out of her skin. "What is it?" she cried. "What's wrong?" "My bracelet." Luella held up her bare wrist, her eyes widening. "It's gone." "Don't panic," said Amanda. "It must be around here somewhere. I'm sure it's just on your vanity, or maybe it fell on the floor. You had it when you came in last night." "I did," cried Luella, clasping her wrist where the missing bracelet should have been. "It has to be in my room somewhere. Unless..." She looked up at Amanda, a false horror on her face, but something else in her eyes. Something sly. "Unless someone took it." The venom in her tone was unmistakable. Amanda stared at her, heart pounding. "And no one was in here, Miss Ramsey," she croaked. "No one except you and me." Luella sat back in her chair. Her eyes were openly gloating now. "Exactly," she purred. Amanda felt as though the ground was tilting under her. She swallowed, gripping the hairbrush tighter, trying to keep a grip on her world. "Why would you do this?" she croaked. "We were good friends once." "Ha! We were," snorted Luella, "until you betrayed me." "Betrayed you? I never did any such thing." "Yes, you did." Luella's eyes flashed, and this time, to Amanda's astonishment, she saw more than petty rage. She saw pain. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I'm the heiress to my father's fortune." Luella looked away, her voice harsh and bitter. "I'm meant to be the most eligible young woman in the whole town. But I grew up like this." Her voice broke as she angrily indicated her abundant curves and pasty skin. "And you grew up tall and willowy with wavy blonde hair and hazel green eyes that make the men stare and stare at you whenever we go anywhere." Luella looked up, her eyes filled with tears of rage. "I will never stand in your shadow again," she spat. "Oh, Luella," said Amanda. "You're beautiful. Don't let those silly boys let you think otherwise." The hardness returned to Luella's face. She whipped around, glaring back into the vanity. "And unless you find another way to get out of my life, you're a thief, Amanda," she spat. "Please, Lou," Amanda begged. "Don't do this. Your father will dismiss me for sure. I have no other family since Mama died." Terror clawed at her throat. "I have nowhere else to go." "I suggest you find somewhere, then. And be quick about it," said Luella. "I'm going to find a suitor at the Christmas ball, and you had better be long gone by then." "But it's November." Amanda cried. "What am I going to do?" "Find another job. A seamstress or a maid," said Luella, waving a dismissive hand. "Sign up to become a mail-order bride, for all I care. Just get out of my life. And never, ever come back." The mail-order bride agency was a fat, squat, square building crouching miserably between a bar filled with raucous laughter and the town jail. Amanda shuddered as she crossed the street, trying not to look at the iron bars on the jailhouse doors. Mr. Ramsey had been kind to her, but he was fiercely protective of Luella. If his beloved daughter accused Amanda of theft, he'd have Amanda thrown in jail for sure. Amanda wasn't sure she'd survive it. The agency building smelled of cigarette smoke and neglect. Amanda shuddered outside the door, pausing on the pavement as she looked up at it. Going out west to marry a stranger? It sounded like madness. But the other servants had talked about it, and Amanda knew that she had no other way. It was her only escape. She just prayed that someone would want her. Amanda stepped inside, the ugly agency building swallowing her whole. Once Amanda was safely out of sight, a plump shadow detached itself from the darkness of a nearby doorway. It was Luella, holding a handkerchief delicately to her nose, fending off the noisome stench from the jail. She grinned, watching Amanda step into the agency. "You won't be a problem to me for much longer," she whispered. It was just a few minutes later that Amanda emerged from the agency. Even at this distance, Luella could see that her old friend was crying. Amanda's slender figure shook, her blonde bun bobbing as she hurried away, her face buried in her handkerchief. One of her sobs, caught on the breeze, reached Luella's ears. She paused, watching Amanda disappear down the street. For a moment, a surge of pity rose in Luella's heart. She remembered a time when she and Amanda used to play with their dolls under the shady oak trees in Luella's backyard. A time when they'd skipped hand in hand between the rose bushes. "Maybe this isn't a good idea," she murmured, stepping back. Then she spotted him coming down the street. Stuart Gordon. He was riding a beautiful, golden palomino that trotted with a flowing silver mane, and his smile flashed like sunlight. Luella retreated back into the doorway as the horse and rider drifted past, her eyes fixed on Stuart's face. He made her heart hammer, her palms sweat. His smile made her world spin. And at the last ball, he'd spent the whole evening staring at Amanda Russell. It was scandalous. Whoever heard of a man of his bearing, making eyes at a maid? But that was exactly what had happened. "No," Luella snarled. She bunched her hands into fists and strode out, heading for the agency. "Amanda won't take his attention from me. Mark my words." Luella pushed the agency door open so hard that the lady behind the counter nearly jumped out of her skin. She was middle-aged but dressed like a mere girl. Luella tried not to stare at the wrinkled folds around the woman's bare neck. "What do you want?" the woman demanded. Luella dumped her purse on the counter. It split open with the force of the movement, and banknotes spilled out in rolls. "I want you to listen very carefully," she said. "The girl who just came in. Remember her? The beautiful blonde? How could I forget? She won't be here for long," said the lady. "No, she won't. Not a minute longer, in fact." Luella pointed at the money. "You will say she already has a fiancé. He's written to the agency asking for a girl exactly like her, and she's such a good fit, you're going to send her west without a moment's delay." The woman frowned. "What are you talking about? I haven't even tried to match her yet. Nor will you try to match her. You'll repeat word for word what I've just told you to say, and you'll send her west immediately. But there is no one waiting for her. Not yet." "That is not my concern," Luella said, impatient now, to be done with the deed. "I have a reputation to uphold." Luella shrugged. "Very well," she said, reaching for the purse. The woman snatched at it, stopping her. "But for you," she said quickly, "I could make an exception." Luella smiled smugly. This was going to be the best Christmas yet. Chapter 3. Amanda couldn't stop staring out of the train window as the rhythmic chuffing of the engine propelled them ever further across a landscape that she never even knew existed. The softly snow-blanketed curves of the gentle hills of Pennsylvania felt like another world instead of being simply thousands of miles away. Where Philadelphia had been all rounded curves and winding roads and wooden fences, New Mexico was jagged edges. It was rocks, dusted with snow, jetting at the sky like broken teeth. It was canyons and cliff tops that looked like they'd been cut from wood by a trembling hand, then had snow blown across them by some thin and nameless wind. The sense of relief that had accompanied Amanda onto the train began to wear thin as they approached what had to be the town of Santa Fe, a tiny cluster of lights in the middle of nothingness as dusk began to settle over the desert. "Santa Fe," yelled the conductor. Amanda took a deep breath, glancing one more time at the letter in her hands. There was almost no information there. A name, Jack Smith, and little else. The lady at the agency had given it to her, saying that this Jack would meet her by the station. If you could call it a station. The train coughed to a halt, and when Amanda stepped out of the sliding doors, there was little more than a wooden platform and some wagons. She froze, scanning the faces of the men waiting by the wagons. Some had wives with them. Others, she shuddered at their harsh expressions and approached the nearest friendly face, that of a young man busy digging a stone out of his horse's foot. "Jack," she croaked. Jack Smith?" The man looked up. "Sorry, miss. It ain't me." His drawl was strange, foreign. Amanda tried not to panic. "Do you know where I can find him?" He shook his head. "Don't know anyone by that name, miss." The other people that Amanda dared to approach gave her much the same answer. By the time she'd moved back to the platform, even the train was gone. Darkness was falling. The cold was rising. And Amanda Russell was completely alone. Levi tried to pay attention as Ma bustled around the kitchen, blabbering ceaselessly about food and decorations and church services. He shoved another strip of bacon in his mouth and chewed, trying to look at least vaguely interested. "And then I think I'll knit a pair of socks for Mrs. Baker," she was saying. "Your father was always talking about how some good warm socks would help her old ankles." "Mrs. Baker hates you, Ma," said Levi. "What's that got to do with anything?" Ma smiled. "How about you, Levi? What do you want for Christmas?" Levi sighed, laying down his fork. "I want to know what to do," he murmured. Ma paused. "You mean about your father's letter?" "It's been a month, Ma," said Levi. His appetite was suddenly gone. "I still don't know what to do. I wish I could live up to his expectations. But the ranch can support us, and the people." He shook his head. "They'll never accept me." "You don't know that until you try." "I have tried. I've lived in Santa Fe my whole life, remember?" Levi gave her a desperate look. "I've been called names in the schoolyard and beaten up in the saloon. I know these people." Ma was about to respond when there was a brisk knock at the door. Levi tensed. "Are you expecting someone?" Wide-eyed, Ma shook her head. "No one's been out here since your father died." Levi got up. "Stay back," he ordered, reaching for his grandfather's shotgun, which lay on a rack by the ranch house door. He kept it cradled in his arms as he approached the door. "Who is it?" he called. "Levi?" The voice was gruff and familiar. "It's me. Mike Benson." Levi relaxed. He lowered the shotgun, opening the door. "Sheriff Benson," he said. "What can I do for you?" The sheriff smiled through his long white whiskers. "Expecting bad company?" Levi shrugged. "Not everyone has accepted us like you have." "Well, I guess it's hard not to accept the family of a man who saved your life," said the sheriff. "I'm sorry to bother you, Levi. Your pa mentioned to me once that he taught you all his tricks." "Is it true? Do you know about doctoring?" "I know the basics," said Levi cautiously. "Basics will do." The sheriff gestured at his wagon, waiting behind him. "Found a young woman by the train station this morning. Never seen her before and no one seems to know her. She's been beaten up pretty bad. Can you help?" Levi glanced back at Ma, who was close behind him. She nodded her encouragement. "I'll see what I can do," he said. The sheriff led him to the wagon and pulled away a pile of blankets. "Thought I should keep her warm." Levi gasped despite himself. The young woman was a mess of blood and bruises, a heap of limbs lying on the straw in the back of the wagon. Her hair was so matted with dirt and blood that he couldn't even guess its color. Her dress was ripped, a sleeve missing, long scratches ran down her arm, there was a gash in her side, and her face looked like it had been pummeled. Her chest only barely moved in a series of shallow little breaths. "Can you help her?" asked the sheriff. "I can try," said Levi. "Come on. Let's get her inside." The sheriff took the girl's legs and Levi slid his arms under her torso. Before lifting her, he looked over at the sheriff. "Oh, and Sheriff Benson." "Yes?" "Thanks for trusting me," said Levi softly. Sheriff Benson gave him an unexpected smile. "Of course," he said. "Your old man saved my life, remember?" "Yes, but my old man had white skin," said Levi simply. The sheriff shrugged. "Not everyone sees people in skin colors, you know," he said. "Come on. Let's get this girl inside." Together, Levi and the sheriff carried the young woman into the ranch house. She was heavy with unconsciousness, her head lolling lifelessly against Levi's chest. Her chin nodded down into her chest, and a harsh, snoring sound emanated from her throat. "She's deeply unconscious," said Levi automatically, startled when a line his father had often said came from his own mouth. "We need to stop the bleeding," he added, trying to shake the strange feeling as they maneuvered into the kitchen. Ma had already cleared the kitchen table. "Oh, the poor dear thing," she gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, as Levi and the sheriff hoisted the young woman onto the table. "She's in a bad way, Ma," said Levi, tipping back his patient's head. She took an easier breath. "Do we still have some bandages?" "I kept all of your papa's things," said Ma. She opened a kitchen cabinet to reveal rolls and rolls of clean, white bandages. Levi didn't quite know what to make of that. "All right," he said. "First we need to stop the bleeding. Then we can begin to clean her wounds." "She's bled badly," said Ma, touching the girl's white hand. "Look how white her nail beds are." "And look at this," said the sheriff. He lifted the hand, showing Levi scraps of dried blood under the girl's fingernails. She took a swipe at her attacker, too. "She's a fighter, all right," said Levi, examining the gash in her side. "She shouldn't be alive." He looked down at her face, expressionless in a deep sleep. On a sudden urge, he gently brushed a strand of blood-streaked hair out of her face. Somewhere under all those bruises, she had a strong and classical beauty, the line of her jaw swollen but strong. "We're going to fight for you," he murmured, almost without meaning to. "We definitely are," said Ma. She'd rolled up her sleeves. "Do you know who she is?" "No idea," said the sheriff, shrugging. "She had a case with her. It was emptied, of course, but I'm guessing she came in on a train. She's not from around here." "Poor girl," said Ma. "What a way to be welcomed into Santa Fe." "There are some bad folk out there," said the sheriff. He sighed. "And I'd best go back to hunting M. I'll pop by in a few days and see how you're getting on." He tipped his hat to Ma. "Have a nice day, ma'am." Ma smiled. "Thank you, Sheriff." Levi didn't look up as the sheriff showed himself out. He was too busy packing the girl's wounds with bandages, letting them soak up and stop the bleeding. "Who are you?" he murmured, looking up at her face again as he put pressure on her side. "And where did you come from?" Chapter 4. Amanda's head hurt, and that was just the start of it. It was a dull, persistent ache, throbbing quietly and unendingly. It was just behind her right temple, and it wouldn't stop. She grimaced, but that sent a wave of pain through her cheek. Amanda tried to raise a hand to her face, and that was when she realized that her entire left side was on fire. She gasped, breathless with the force of the agony, and tried to move. The pain lanced red-hot and sharp through her side, and when she tried to move, it gripped her with a terrifying strength. "Shoo!" The unfamiliar voice had a slow, western drawl, but it was somehow reassuring. Hands touched Amanda's shoulders, then her brow, then her unhurt cheek. "It's all right, dear. You're safe. Don't move too much. You've been hurt." Amanda opened her eyes. A haze of light stabbed at them, and she blinked hard, trying to make sense of the world. She remembered a bracelet. Luella, a train. The station. She was in the West somewhere. What had happened? Her swimming vision began to clear, and Amanda made out a face directly above her. The face was dark-skinned, wrinkled as a walnut, bound on both sides by long black braids, and it looked like it had come directly from a book. Amanda could almost see the captive underneath it, an Indian woman. Indians. That was why she was so sore. They'd captured her. Her heart hammered on her ribs, and she squirmed, trying to move back. "No, no, honey." The woman spoke, and she didn't sound like a savage. Her voice was gentle. "Don't be afraid. No one's here to hurt you now. It's just me." Her voice was steadying. Amanda paused, trying to turn her neck to look around. She wasn't lying in the dirt by a fire or in a grass hut. She was in a large, airy room with lace curtains and an elegant mirror on the wall. In the mirror, she saw that her face was a mass of black and blue bruises. She raised her fingertips to the pitch-black bruise on her temple, and a memory surfaced. A handsome face, the chin stubbed, the eyes ice blue. Now, little lady. What have we here? And then, she remembered a fist pounding into her head. You're all right now, the Indian woman repeated. She stroked Amanda's hair. You don't have to be scared. My name is Bina, and I'm here to help you. How did I get here? Amanda croaked. Her throat felt like sandpaper, and she coughed, a blood clot dripping onto the clean linen that covered her. Bina didn't seem to be bothered. She held a tin cup of water to Amanda's lips, and she sucked at it gratefully, the liquid soothing her throat. The sheriff found you, dear, said Bina. Just lying by the train station with an empty case. Seems like someone robbed you. Her brows furrowed with concern. Or don't you remember? I remember a little, said Amanda. My son is good with healing people, so the sheriff brought you here for us to take care of you. You're safe now, said Bina. Amanda allowed herself to relax back into her pillows. The pain was still intense, but there was something so soothing about Bina. The older woman smiled at her, and footsteps sounded on the stairs. That'll be my son now, she said. He's going to be pleased that you're awake. The door opened, and Amanda struggled to turn her head. When she did, she felt breathless, and this time, not with pain. The figure in the doorway was handsome in a way that none of the men who fawned over Luella back in Philadelphia had ever been. Instead of being carefully trimmed, his hair was close-cropped and black. Instead of white and flawless, his caramel skin was scarred and knotted. The collared sky-blue shirt he wore hung loosely on powerful shoulders, but something about the way he softly shut the door behind him made Amanda think that his big, gnarled hands were gentle. He turned to her, and despite his mighty frame, his eyes were the deepest, softest brown she'd ever seen. I see you're awake, he said. She's just woken up a few minutes ago, said Bina. She took Amanda's hand and gave it a little squeeze. This is my son, Levi. He's the one who's been taking care of you, dear. Amanda tried to smile, but it made her wounded cheek hurt. It's nice to meet you, she croaked. Levi nodded. What happened to you? Levi. Bina's tone was gently reproachful. She touched Amanda's hair, which someone had washed and combed out. It flowed over her shoulders. Tell us your name first, darling. Amanda's eyes darted from Bina's kindly face to the strong figure behind her, and she felt her throat close up. She wanted to tell them everything, including the fact that she was pretty sure the mail-order bride agency had swindled her, but what then? What would they do to an unmarried woman all by herself? Do you remember? Asked Bina gently. Lucy, Amanda stammered out. My name is Lucy. Lucy, Ramsey. She bit her lip. I'm from Philadelphia. What are you doing all the way out here, then, Lucy? Asked Levi. His tone was gentle. And who did this to you? I'm waiting for, she swallowed. I'm waiting for my husband. He's supposed to come into Santa Fe from a business trip further west. Well, he was supposed to meet me at the train station. He must have been delayed, but he said he'd be here by Christmas. So, who hurt you? Asked Bina. Amanda couldn't believe it. They'd swallowed her lie, and immediately, a deep guilt began to throb in her heart. They'd saved her, and she'd lied to them. But what could she do? Who could she trust? Even her best friend had turned against her back in Philadelphia. It's all right if you can't remember, said Bina, resting a hand on Amanda's shoulder. We just want to know so that we can help Sheriff Benson to track down the people who harmed you. No, I remember, said Amanda. At least now she could tell the truth. It was a group of men. She took a sharp breath, remembering, and pain stabbed through her ribs. She clutched at them, a moan escaping her lips. Levi was suddenly beside her, so close that she could smell him. His scent was of sagebrush and horses and fresh air, and when his hands touched her wrists, they were as gentle as she'd expected. "Rest now," he said, his voice warm and close. "You've been badly hurt, but you'll recover." Amanda sagged back onto her pillows, darkness swarming around the edges of her vision. The guilt was still sharp and acute in her heart. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," said Levi quietly. "Now sleep." Amanda couldn't have disobeyed even if she'd wanted to. She sank back down into a welcoming darkness. Chapter 5. A plume of dust drifted in the air behind Leroy Olson's gang, but despite his horse's brisk pace, he could still read the sign in the distance on the outskirts of Santa Fe. So, they'd circled back now, and he was glad to be getting back to civilization. "Hey, boys," he yelled, turning back to shout at the group of men riding behind him. Each had a six-shooter on either hip. "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" His second-in-command, Danny Black, let out a wild whoop. "Well, that looks like a saloon to me," he shouted. "A very suitable watering hole," mocked another from behind Danny. Leroy laughed and took off his hat, waving it above his head. "Let's go get it, boys." His jaded horse snorted when Leroy punched his rowel spurs against its sweaty flanks, but it knew it didn't have much of a choice other than to labor up into a gallop. Yipping and whistling behind him, Leroy's happy gang followed him up to the front of the saloon. Slamming his weight back in the saddle, Leroy leaned against his reins, sending the horse skidding to a halt. "This'll about do," he said, looking at the saloon with a critical eye. "Don't you think we should be moving on, Leroy?" asked Danny, pulling up beside him. "We didn't get much around here day before yesterday. I vote we go back up north, look for some more banks to rob." "Or trains," suggested another rider. "That last little train robbery job we did was a sweet one, weren't it, boys?" He patted his saddlebags, which jingled with gold. The rest of the gang whooped enthusiastically. "Nah." Leroy shook his head, and his men immediately fell silent. "We want to keep a low profile for a few weeks, let the train robbery blow over." He chewed on the wad of tobacco in his cheek, eyeing the saloon. "Besides, it's Christmas, isn't it? People are feelin' charitable. Their guard is down. They're not lookin' for train robbers." He leered at the group. "I'm sure there's still some fun to be had in this town, even if we didn't get much from that girl." Danny laughed. "That's right, boss," he said. "Starting with this here saloon." Leroy swung down from his horse and tossed the reins over the hitching rail. The tired mare hung its head, relieved to be standing still. "Come on, boys." Sheriff Benson sat back, quietly nursing his whiskey. He only allowed himself a glass or two a couple of days a week, his little treat to himself, while his badge lay at home on the nightstand. Still, leaving the job behind wasn't as simple as taking off the badge. He knew at the moment that the group of men swaggered into the saloon, even though he didn't turn to look at them. He kept his eyes steadily trained on his glass, but every hair on the back of his neck stood bolt upright at the mere sound of their voices. Sheriff Benson was an old lawman, and he knew a lot of things. Especially trouble when he saw it. When Amanda woke on the fourth day, she was surprised to find that she had rolled over in her sleep. Slowly, she stretched her limbs, waiting for the waves of pain to assault her the way they had greeted her every time she woke up from the fitful naps that had occupied her days. Glancing toward the window, she saw that the light had the clean, crisp quality of morning. She must have slept through the night for the first time since the attack, and her grateful body was feeling it. Sitting up, Amanda stretched her arms upward, wincing when the movement tugged at the stitches in her side. She tugged up her shirt to look at the jagged wound, neatly stitched now. Her mind fled back to that night. It had started to come back to her in bits and pieces, the leering face of the man whose breath coughed tobacco and alcohol at her, his hands pawing at her dress, one of his buddies grabbing her case out of her hands, ripping it open, her change of clothes spilling across the dirt. "She don't have much, sir," the man had said. But the blue-eyed man just smiled wider, grabbing her throat, pinning her up against the rails of the platform. She's got something, he purred, and she'd felt his eyes travel across her body. She'd screamed, and that was when he stabbed her. She could still remember the harsh feeling of metal sliding across her ribs. No, Amanda told herself out loud, shaking her head. She was surprised to find that the movement didn't hurt as much anymore. We're not thinking about that right now. She pulled back the covers and slipped her feet onto the ground. A moment of dizziness clutched at her, but once she had sat still and blinked for a few moments, it left her. Slowly, clutching the headboard just in case, Amanda got to her feet. Her legs held, allowing her to walk across the room to the vanity in the corner. Her face in the mirror was still bruised, but now those bruises were yellow and green instead of black and blue. There was a gentle knock on the door. Amanda spun a little faster than she should have and put a hand out to steady herself against the vanity. "Lucy, dear," called a familiar voice. "It's only me, Bina." "Oh." Amanda felt herself relax, reminding herself once again that she'd told them her name was Lucy. "Come on in." Bina stepped inside, and when her eyes rested kindly on Amanda, they lit up. "You're out of bed," she cried. "That's wonderful. How do you feel?" "Still a little fragile," said Amanda. "But much better." She smiled. "Thanks to you." "Thanks to Levi, and God's healing grace," said Bina sincerely. "Now, would you like some help getting dressed? And how about a nice breakfast downstairs? I'm sure you're tired of this room by now." Amanda gratefully submitted to Bina's ministrations, allowing herself to have a plain checkered blue dress pulled over her head. "Your dress was ruined, my dear," Bina said, tying the dress at the back. "This was mine when I was younger, and thinner." She chuckled. "Thank you, Bina." Amanda smoothed the dress down over her hips and smiled at herself in the mirror. It was nowhere near as fine as the clothes she'd worn as Luella's handmaiden, but somehow it felt more like home. "It's beautiful." "You're beautiful, my dear," said Bina fondly, tucking Amanda's hair back over her shoulders. "Let me walk you downstairs." Amanda leaned gratefully on Bina's outstretched arm as they moved down to the rest of the house. The wonderful smell of sausages frying drifted up to her on the staircase. She said. "Those smell good." "I'm glad to see you have an appetite," said Bina, patting Amanda's hand. They stepped into the kitchen, and Amanda caught a quick glimpse of the sturdy wooden table and gleaming cabinets before her eyes were magnetized toward the young man standing on one side of the room, leaning against the cabinets, his powerful arms folded. Levi's sleeves were rolled up to the elbow despite the snow outside, revealing thick veins that patterned his defined forearms. Amanda had to drag her eyes away from them, then force herself not to stare too openly into his eyes. "Gee, good morning," she managed. "Hello, Lucy." The corner of Levi's mouth quirked up, making Amanda's stomach turn a somersault. "How do you feel?" "I'm much better, thanks," she said. "I'm glad to hear it. Ma did a good job keeping your wounds from getting infected," said Levi. "Now it's just a matter of healing time. And for healing, we need food." Bina showed Amanda to a chair and bustled off toward the stove. "It's just about ready." There was a brisk rap on the door, and a tall, graying man with a white mustache poked his head inside. "Did someone say food is ready?" he said cheerfully, then took a deep breath. That smells great." Bina laughed. "So, I'm told," she said. "Lucy, do you remember Sheriff Benson?" Amanda looked up at the man, trying to place him. I'm sorry," she said. "It's all right." The sheriff stepped inside and gave her a smile that lit up his warm eyes. "You were pretty beaten up when I found you, young lady. I'm happy to see you're back on your feet." "Sheriff Benson is the man who found you and brought you here," Levi explained quietly. Amanda got up and gave the sheriff a little curtsy. "Then I owe my life to you, sir," she said. "Just doing my job, ma'am." Sheriff Benson smiled. "I'm sorry to interrupt your breakfast, but do you mind if I ask you a few questions? I want to catch the men who did this to you." Amanda swallowed, not wanting to relive the attack. Her eyes darted to Levi, and he stepped forward, his tone gentle. "I know this must be hard for you, Lucy, but the sheriff needs to catch them," he said. "We don't want them to have the chance to hurt anyone else." Amanda nodded. "You're right." The sheriff sat down opposite her and gave her a warm smile. "Lucy, you say?" Lucy Ramsey," said Amanda, the lie bitter on the back of her tongue. "I'm from Philadelphia. My husband is on business in the area. He was supposed to have arrived in Santa Fe before I did, but he did warn me that he might be delayed until Christmas." The sheriff shook his head, and Amanda noticed a hint of disapproval in his expression, but he hid it well. "So had you just arrived in Santa Fe?" "I had," said Amanda. "I was looking for my husband when a group of men came out of nowhere." Her head began to throb, and she held a hand to it. "I'm sorry, Sheriff. It's all so foggy." "She had a head injury," said Levi quietly. "She might not remember everything." "That's all right, dear." The sheriff gave her a fatherly smile. "Do you think you can describe any of the men?" Amanda bit her lip. "One had blue eyes, but that's about all I remember," she said. "I don't know if I'd recognize them if I saw them again." "That's all right." The sheriff studied her, his eyes filled with concern. "What were you planning to do while you waited for your husband?" Amanda swallowed. The future suddenly opened up before her, gaping at her feet like a fathomless abyss. She had no one here. She had nowhere to turn. He told me to get set up in a hotel," she croaked out. "Alone?" Levi snorted derisively. "Levi," said Bina sharply. "I'm starting to think that that's not a good idea," said Amanda weakly. "No. It's a terrible idea," said Bina, "and that's why you're going to stay with us until your husband gets here." Amanda stared at her. "Do you mean it?" "Of course, I mean it." Bina leaned over and gripped Amanda's hand tightly. "We have plenty of room, my dear. And I'm hurting for some female company." She winked. "That sounds good to me," said Sheriff Benson, relaxing visibly. Levi gave a brief nod. "It's going to be the best option for you," he said. Amanda felt her eyes filling with tears of gratitude and grief. She clung to Bina's hand, her heart shattered that she had lied to these good people. But how could she go back now? "Thank you," she croaked. "Thank you." Chapter 6. The plum pudding was richly fragrant when Amanda lifted it out of the oven. Wincing at the stitches that still tugged in her side, she set it down on the kitchen table and gazed at it in admiration. "Bina, it's beautiful," she said. "I've never seen anything like it. Your recipe is wonderful." Bina laughed from where she was busily rolling out some gingerbread. "And easy, too," she said. "It's Levi's grandmama's recipe." Amanda turned the plum pudding to stare at it from another angle. "I bet it's just as delicious as it looks." "It's always a treat," Bina agreed. "I like to make it around Christmas time. And these little gingerbread figures, too." She smiled down at the sheet of dough. "Levi used to love them when he was a little boy. And his father, too, before he passed." Her smile flickered. "This will be our first Christmas without him." "I'm sorry," said Amanda gently, meaning it. "It sounds like your husband was a good man." "The best I ever knew," said Bina. Her smile was fond but tinged with sadness. "When we were little children, I was never allowed to go to school, but Jim would come home every afternoon and show me what he learned. His parents helped, but Jim was the one who taught me how to read. And that's how I grew to learn so much more about the world around me than most of my ancestors ever did." Amanda gazed at her, head to one side. "So, you and Jim grew up together?" "Jim's father found me in a ruined Apache village when I was just a little girl," said Bina. "My family had been attacked and killed." Amanda stared at her, horrified. "Oh, Bina, I'm so sorry." "I didn't." Bina smiled, shaking her head. "Don't worry, sweet child," she said. I have grieved so deeply over all my people. I hardly remember them from the village, but I still miss them, and I still see what is being done to the Apache and it hurts my heart. But I trust God nonetheless, because He has been good to me. Jim's father was his hands and feet that day when he rescued me from the ashes of my village. What happened to you then? Asked Amanda. James and his wife took me in, said Bina. Despite the fact that many of the townsfolk hated me, treated me like a dog or some varmint that they wanted to kill, they never let me go. That is why I say that God was good to me even in the midst of my deepest troubles. The older woman's eyes grew misty. He brought me to Him through the kindness of the people who raised me. And Jim and I, well, we were always the best of friends. When Jim's parents died, we realized we never wanted to be apart, so we married. And Levi was the result. You seem so wise, Bina, said Amanda. She sighed, feeling guilt and terror grip her. She had no idea what she was going to do when Christmas came, and everyone realized that there was no husband on his way to save her. What then? Where could she go? The warm scent of the pudding in front of her was a terrifying reminder that the time was not far away. Bina seemed to sense her distress. Laying a hand on Amanda's shoulder, she gave her a smile that blazed with hope. God will bless you in your darkness, too, she said. Even when you don't understand what He's doing, He is always good, and always sure. Amanda struggled to smile. Thank you, Bina, she said. Sometimes I just need a little help believing that. Amanda leaned against the wicker back of the rocking chair, feeling the dull throb in her side and head. It was so much better that sometimes she could forget about it completely, but she was starting to think that maybe helping Bina with wrapping little boxes of cookies to give as early Christmas gifts all day hadn't been the best idea. Still, it was nothing that a little rest couldn't cure, she hoped. She tried to relax her muscles one by one, letting her battered body relax into the chair. A flicker of movement caught her eye in the yard in front of the ranch house. It was Levi, carrying 2 rope halters over his arm. He had a tin in his hand, which rattled with grain when he shook it. His movements were sure and confident, boots crunching on the snow with a fearless certainty that was echoed in the way that he held his shoulders. Amanda let her eyes follow him, knowing that she couldn't tear them away even if she tried. He paused, his eyes partially shaded by his broad-brimmed hat, but nonetheless glittering in their intensity. His lips pursed, and he gave a piercing whistle, rattling the can again. Thunder broke out on the horizon. 2 great, big-boned draft horses charged into view, their powerful bodies plunging across the snow as Levi called for them, but Amanda wasn't watching their mighty display. Her eyes were fixed on Levi as he gave that lopsided smile again, watching the horses gallop toward him. How was this beautiful young man not yet married? Amanda couldn't understand it. He was kind, intelligent, and gentle, quiet at times, but she liked it. And beautiful. She touched her left ring finger, rubbing the spot where a wedding ring was supposed to be. She'd told Bina that the thugs who attacked her had taken her ring. How would she and Levi react when they discovered that there had never been any ring? Bina's hand brushed Amanda's shoulder lightly, but the touch still made her jump. Sorry, said Bina, smiling. She glanced over at Levi, quirking an eyebrow as if she'd guessed what Amanda was looking at. I've just come to see if you're all right. You worked hard today, Lucy. Amanda tried to relax. Just a little sore, that's all, she said. Levi will have a look at your injuries after dinner, said Bina. Amanda couldn't resist another curious glance. How come Levi knows so much about helping injured people, she asked. He put in stitches. I'm sure not every rancher out here is so skilled. No. Bina laughed. Levi's father was the doctor of Santa Fe. Even though he married a native woman, he was still so deeply loved. People judged him, but they also needed him. She sighed. It's harder for Levi. He has all the skills his father did, and the same healing touch, but it's harder for the people to forget about me when he has my skin. My eyes. She lifted a hand to her cheek and sighed. That's so sad, said Amanda. It's the way of this ugly old world, my dear, said Bina, and one more reason to be glad our Savior is coming soon. Come. Let's go to dinner. It's nearly Christmas. Nearly time to celebrate his birth. Bina didn't have to watch to know that Levi's fingers were as delicate as butterfly wings on Lucy's wounded side. She held the girl's hand, tooting in disapproval as she and Levi both inspected the wound in her side. The stitches had been taken out, but the shallow remnants of the wound still remained, jagged on her ribs. The bruising around it had faded to yellow and brown. It's still nice and clean, said Levi, gently feeling over Lucy's ribs. I think you just overexerted yourself a little. It's healing well. Thanks to you, said Lucy softly. Levi looked up, and Bina saw his body stiffen as he realized that he was nose to nose with Lucy now. Her hazel eyes had captivated him, drawing her in the way they'd done increasingly often over the past few days. Levi moved as if to look away, but he didn't seem able. His eyes were locked on Lucy's, and she sat stock still, her limpid gaze fixed on his. His hand was still resting on her side. Bina saw Lucy's lips part. Then, her eyelashes fluttered. She blinked the moment away, turning her head, a faint blush rising to her faultless cheeks. Levi stepped back, allowing his hands to fall back to his sides. Yes, it's doing well, he stammered, his eyes everywhere except on Lucy. Thank you, said Lucy softly. She tugged her shirt back down over the wound, slipped her arms back into her dress. The frozen moment had passed, but the memory of it lingered in the way Lucy's eyes followed Levi across the room when he went to wash his hands at the small basin on the counter. His father had always used this as his examination room. Here. Some professionalism returning to his movements, Levi grabbed a pot of balm from the cabinet by his head. This will help for the last of the bruising. Lucy accepted it without a word. Levi cleared his throat. Well, that's it, then, he said, and strode out. Bina watched Lucy's eyes follow him out of the room. She knew what she had seen, and it was something she was seeing more and more as the days passed, Levi's eyes lingering on Lucy, Lucy's expression changing every time he stepped into the room. She had known, even before Levi was born, that she was bringing him into a world that would doom him to be alone for the rest of his life. Yet every year, she prayed for a Christmas miracle. Bina sighed, turning away. If only it wasn't for that husband that was on his way, she would have hoped that maybe Lucy could be that miracle. Chapter 7. Amanda gave a little growl of frustration as a piece of gingerbread crumbled in her fingers. Oh, Bina, she cried. I've broken another one. I was just trying to get the string through, but the whole thing just, she sighed, holding up yet another headless gingerbread man. Bina laughed with her characteristic good nature. She was busy hanging a little gingerbread reindeer on the tree. Despite its delicate legs, not a single crumb fell to the ground. It takes some practice, she said. I've broken more than I can even remember. Jim and I used to drive his mother crazy. He'd eat half of them, and I'd break the other half. Amanda shook her head ruefully. It seems like I'm just as bad. Don't worry. Bina took a gingerbread star from her and expertly threaded a piece of string through a hole in one of its arms. You'll learn. She gave Amanda a curious glance, the type that she'd been seeing more and more often in the past few days. Haven't you ever decorated a Christmas tree before? Well, I suppose. When I was very little, said Amanda. But it's been a very long time. And we used ribbons and baubles and tinsel then. Those things must be cheaper in the East than they are here, commented Bina. Not really. Amanda shook her head. My mother was a governess to a very wealthy family in Philadelphia. I grew up with her little girl, and when I was grown, I became her maidservant. Bina looked at her, surprised. And your husband allowed it? Amanda felt the floor teeter under her feet. She fished for an answer, struggling to find a satisfactory explanation for the dark eyes watching her. That was before we met, she managed. We moved to a house in another part of Philadelphia. Bina gave her a steady look, and for all the kindness in her eyes, Amanda felt as though the older woman was looking right through her. Sweating despite the snow fluttering down outside, Amanda turned to grab another gingerbread figure. Her hands were shaking, and the little gingerbread donkey's front legs fell off, shattering on the flagstones. "Bina, I'm so sorry," Amanda whispered. Bina leaned over, gripping her hand, and smiled at her. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Lucy," she said softly. "God gave all of us forgiveness and long-suffering. It's the least we can do for the people we care about." Amanda met her eyes, shame and gratitude filling her heart. She knew that Bina wasn't just talking about gingerbread. The gentleness in Bina's voice when she spoke to Amanda simply wouldn't leave her. It followed her, not allowing her to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, Amanda saw the old woman's shrewd eyes watching her. Bina knew she was hiding something, Amanda was sure of it. And the worst part wasn't that the old woman knew. It was that she wasn't angry about it. Her bed began to feel stifling. Pulling on her borrowed slippers and a thick woolen robe over her nightdress, Amanda tiptoed downstairs, ignoring the now familiar creaks of the old house around her. She slipped through the door and out onto the veranda. It was cold, the air biting, the stars like a million diamonds scattered across a black velvet sky. Something about the chill was refreshing, even though it made Amanda tuck her robe more tightly around her body. She settled down into her rocking chair and gazed across the moonlit snow that stretched in every direction. Compared to the brick walls that had surrounded her back in Philadelphia, it felt like a different world. A lonely one. Cold and alien. "What are you doing out here?" she whispered to herself. There were no answers in the plume of steam that came out with her breath, curling in the moonlight. Why hadn't she just stayed in Philadelphia, looked for another job? A shudder ran down her spine. She knew that Luella could have ruined her reputation, and her life. For a moment, she wondered if Luella had been behind the agency's treatment of her. Or maybe the lady behind the counter was mean-spirited or had simply disliked her. Levi and Bina and the sheriff would dislike her, too, if they found out. If they knew she had lied to them. She gazed down at her hands where they lay in her lap, shame rising in her gut like vomit. They had rescued her from certain death, taken her in, treated her with nothing but kindness. And she had given them nothing but lies in return. What was she going to do after Christmas? What would she do if they threw her out? If they threw her in jail? Worst of all, what was she going to do when she saw the heartache in their eyes? Silas Buck was missing both of his front teeth, rather prematurely. They'd been knocked out in one of his many skirmishes, but he still managed to sneer through the gap, his eyes flashing in derision as he stared down at Levi. "You know what my father calls you," he hissed, his word whistling through the gap in his teeth. Levi's grip tightened on his lunchbox. He wished wholeheartedly that Ma had let him stay home from school when he'd told her that he was sick, but she'd just given him his lunch and told him that he was a child of God. He didn't feel like it now, with Silas's fists bunched by his sides. "He calls you a half-breed." Silas leaned closer, spitting the words. "He says you ain't fit to share a classroom with us. He says your kind oughta be exterminated." The words made something flash fire in Levi's heart. He looked up, just in time for Silas's chubby fist to smash into his nose. Silas was only 7, but he was big enough to send to Levi flying. Blood spurted across Levi's upper lip, and he squirmed helplessly as Silas and his gang advanced. Levi sat up, panting. The vivid image of the schoolyard faded gently into his moonlit bedroom. Sweat had soaked the sheets around him, and he shook his head, feeling the disquiet fade away. There was still a pit of nausea at the bottom of his stomach as he settled back down on his pillows, trying to blink away the bad dream. Silas Buck couldn't punch him up anymore. He'd grown into a chubby, balding banker, but he knew that the people of Santa Fe still said the same things about him behind closed doors. He needed some fresh air. Getting up, Levi padded downstairs, enjoying the cold on his sweaty skin. When he stepped into the kitchen, he heard it. A soft, rhythmic, yet broken noise coming from the veranda. A woman crying. Slowly, Levi pushed the front door open. Lucy was a hunched figure in the rocking chair she loved. Her wavy, golden hair was in disarray, spilling down her shoulders like a fallen halo. Her body trembled, her face buried in her hands as she cried. Her shattered posture wrenched at Levi's heart even as he couldn't peel his eyes away from the way the silver moonlight lit up the ends of her hair. "Lucy?" Amanda looked up. Levi's eyes were deep and concerned where he hovered in the doorway. Sweat had soaked a dark V shape in the neck of his gray shirt, and his hair was squashed out of shape on one side of his head. His feet were bare, and Amanda stared down at them, her shame still overwhelming. She tried to speak, but all that came out was another sob. "Lucy, what's the matter?" Levi left the door to bang softly shut behind him. He padded over to her, and his fingertips brushed her shoulder with a touch that made something flutter in her stomach. Sinking to his haunches, he placed his other hand on her knee. "Are you in pain?" "No," Amanda managed. She swallowed hard, trying to choke down the lump that had filled her throat. "It's not that." Levi stared up at her. In the moonlight, her hazel eyes were luminous, limpid. He could have gotten lost in their depths, gazed into them all night as if they were stars, and still not been able to plot every mysterious constellation. Ma said that she was hiding something that made her scared. He wished he knew what it was, wished he could coax it out of her, like a frightened bunny out of a hole. He looked away quickly, chiding himself. She was a married woman. His throat was dry. He cleared it sharply. "Would you like me to call Ma for you?" "No. It's all right, thank you." Lucy smiled, wiping at her eyes. The glitter of tears only made them look deeper. "I guess I'm just missing home." Sometimes, she lowered her eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath. "Sometimes it can feel so empty out here." Levi straightened, pulling a chair closer, and settled into it even though lifting his hands away from her felt like loss somehow. "It must be very different for you." "It is," said Lucy. "It just feels so far away from what I know." "I know. But you're safe with us," said Levi. He touched her arm with his fingertips, wanting her to look up. "You're safe here," he repeated. Her eyes met his, and their depth, their pain, it was too much for him. As if magnetized to her, his right hand lifted, and his fingertips brushed the gossamer softness of her peach blossom cheek for a moment that made every hair on his body stand on end. For a moment, she tipped her head into the embrace, pressing her face into his palm, and Levi's heart thundered like a stampede on the prairie. He would have leaned forward and kissed her. He would have scooped her into his arms and taken her somewhere that she would never have to feel this pain again. But he stopped, as if he'd run into a wall, and pulled back. "She's married, Levi." He yelled at himself in his head. I'm so sorry." He got up so fast that his chair fell over, clattering on the wooden floor. "I'm so sorry." She said nothing, and it only made him feel worse as he fled back into the ranch house. Amanda slowly lifted her fingers to her cheek, as if the imprint of Levi's touch would still be glowing there, like his hand had been dipped in molten gold and left the shining evidence on her skin. Her chest felt tight, but this time, it wasn't with pain. The realization threatened to break her and heal her all at once. He felt the same way that she did. Chapter 8. Levi crashed through the front door like an angry bull. He bellowed. "I'm right here, darling," said Bina, standing at the sink with the breakfast dishes. "You don't have to shout." Levi's shoulders were still set with a harsh tension, but his eyes relented a little. "Sorry, Ma. Do you know where I put my axe?" He folded his arms, muscles flexing against his shirt. "I need to cut some firewood." "I think you left it in the garden shed, dear," said Bina, "after you cut the Christmas tree." "Thanks." Levi turned to go. "Levi, wait," Bina called. He backed into the kitchen again, his eyes as wary as when he'd been a little boy and she'd caught him stealing candy canes. She dried her hands on a dishcloth and came over to him, reaching up to rest a hand on his cheek. He had the same high cheekbones as she remembered her father having. "Darling," she said, quietly. "Won't you tell me what's going on?" He moved sharply to put a hand on her wrist, but when his touch descended, it was gentle. "Nothing, Ma," he said, frustration bubbling just beneath his controlled tone. "I know it's not nothing, my boy," said Bina. "And you know I know it." Levi's shoulders sagged as he sighed. "I don't want to talk about it." "Well, keeping it all cooped up inside of you hasn't done you much good for the past 3 days, said Bina briskly. She pulled out a chair by the kitchen table and dragged Levi into it by his shoulder. "Sit and talk. You've been stampeding around here like a wounded buffalo, and it's Christmas. This isn't the time to behave that way, or," she added, her voice gentling, "to feel that way." Levi gave a heavy sigh, resting his elbows on the table. He gazed out of the kitchen window, and Bina followed his eyes to exactly where she'd expected them to go, Lucy. The girl was outside in the farmyard, scattering handfuls of corn on the ground of the chicken coop. Plump hens waddled across the dirt, clucking contentedly as they pecked up the feed. Lucy was watching them, her gaze vague and distant. Her hair poured over her shoulder like molten butter. Bina sat down beside Levi and rested a hand on his knee. "I know it's about Lucy, dear." Levi groaned, pressing the heels of his hands into his temples. "It is, Ma," he confessed. "I feel so ashamed." "What happened?" asked Bina. "Nothing, not really." Levi gave a sigh that shook his whole body. "It's not what happened. It's the way that I feel." He lifted his head, pressing a palm into the middle of his chest. "Every time she looks at me, I tremble deep inside. Her eyes do something to me, Ma. He spoke the words softly. "They call me." "You're in love, my son," said Bina. "I know." Levi erupted, slamming both of his hands down on the table. "I know," he repeated more gently. "And that's why I'm ashamed. She's a married woman, Ma. I can't feel this way about her. I don't," he gritted his teeth. "I don't know what to do about it." He turned his anguished eyes on her. "I don't know how not to feel this way." "Oh, Levi." Bina put an arm around his shoulders and pulled her boy close. "She's so kind to me, Ma," Levi whispered. "It's as if she doesn't even notice that I'm different. I finally found her, the woman who wouldn't judge me. But she's married to someone else." He cleared his throat, and Bina could hear tears gathering there. "What do I do?" "You trust in God, my darling boy," said Bina, pulling his head down so that she could kiss his forehead and stroke his spiky hair. "I'm sorry. I don't have any other advice than that. You just keep on trusting and believing in him." Sheriff Benson folded his arms over his bulging belly, gazing down at the poster lying on his desk. An all-too-familiar face glared up at him from the page, transfixed with an ugly sneer, the eyes glittering under the brim of the hat. If he hadn't looked into that face before, the good sheriff might have thought that the sketch artist's imagination had run a little wild as he created the expression of pure malice in those penciled eyes. The door of his office crashed open, and his deputy, a fresh-faced, jug-eared young man who looked like his mama had cut his hair, bounded in. He almost skipped with delight when he saw the poster on the sheriff's desk. "Is that a wanted poster, boss?" "Sure is." Sheriff Benson sighed, not wanting to be too harsh on young Johnny Wilfred. "Just came in from the next town. This man is the leader of an outlaw gang that robbed a train a couple weeks ago." Johnny leaned over, studying the poster. "Are we going on a manhunt?" he asked with excitement in his voice. "Nah." Sheriff Benson shook his head. "I already know who this man is." The deputy practically vibrated with eagerness. "Well, let's go and get him, boss." "It's not that simple," said the sheriff. "There's a lot of them, Johnny. 12 men, all armed to the teeth. They took down an entire train, and the train was guarded. It's going to take more than just the 2 of us to stop them." "Can't we get reinforcements?" asked Johnny. "Not this time of year. With the holidays around the corner, good folk are more relaxed. More of a target." Sheriff Benson chewed on the inside of his cheek. "All of these towns need all the help they can get." Johnny deflated somewhat. He folded his arms. "So, what are we going to do, boss?" We can't just ignore them. We're not going to, said Sheriff Benson. We're going to keep a very, very good eye on them. But apart from that, until Christmas is over, he sighed, spreading his hands. There's not very much more that we can do. He could see that his words didn't sit well with idealistic young Johnny, and if he was honest, they didn't sit well with him either. But there was nothing he could do. Nothing but watch that gang like a hawk. And wait. Bina sat between Amanda and Levi on the driver's seat of the wagon, a kind of no man's land between two icy fronts. Amanda could see that the silence that had stretched out between her and Levi ever since that night on the porch was starting to wear on Bina. The creases around her eyes seemed deeper, her smile not as quick as it had always been. Today, though, as the two ponderous cart horses lugged the wagon along the main road to the town, the old woman was grinning widely. "Ah, Christmas is a wonderful time, isn't it?" she said, gazing around the homes and businesses that lined the dusty main road. "Just look at all those decorations." "It is Christmas Eve, Ma," said Levi, trying to smile. "Santa Fe is looking its best." Bina put a hand on his knee. "You look nervous, dear," she said. Levi shifted uncomfortably on the seat, his dark skin flushing darker still. "You know I'm not comfortable going to church," he muttered. "Everyone stares at me. I can feel their judgment." "It's no reason not to go, Levi," said Bina primly. "Besides, it's the Christmas Eve service. We've never missed it, and we're not going to start now." She gave Amanda a shrewd glance. "With the silence that's been filling our house lately, I'd say that a good church service is very much needed." Shame heated Amanda's skin. She lowered her head, staring down at the checkered dress that Bina had taken in for her. Yet another gift that she'd been undeservedly given by these people. And she knew, she'd seen in Levi's eyes, that cold night on the porch, that he wanted to give her even more. That he felt terrible for touching her at all, thinking she was a married woman. Back in Philadelphia, Amanda hadn't seen that same pure respect for another man's wife, and she loved it in Levi. Yet she couldn't tell him that. She couldn't tell him now that she'd been lying to them both all along. It was easier just to avoid him, and so the gray silence surrounded them like a shroud. "Here we are," Levi grunted, reining the wagon to a halt. The church building was made of sturdy adobe, its facade climbing high above the humble businesses that surrounded it, a wooden cross soared at its apex, forming an unmistakable silhouette. Amanda's heart felt squeezed. She hadn't realized just how much she'd missed church since she'd left Philadelphia. While Levi tended to the horses, Bina led Amanda up the simple stone steps to the doors at the front of the church. They were wide open, and a gaggle of people shuffled inside, apologizing quietly as they bumped into one another, finding their spots in wooden pews. Amanda could walk easily now, and she held on to Bina's hand more for contact than support. They just settled into their seats when Levi hurried to join them, and the minister took his place at the pulpit. The stately organ told out its long notes, and the people rose, their voices joining together in a familiar hymn that washed over Amanda's weary soul like warm, cleansing water. "Oh, come all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant, oh come ye to Bethlehem." Despite the slight tenderness that still lingered in her ribs, Amanda closed her eyes and sang with her whole heart, enjoying the simple and timeless truth that Jesus came to the world to be born a man and save the souls of multitudes. The congregation settled into their pews, and Amanda stared up at the minister's face. He was a well-padded, soft-cornered man with red cheeks and sparkling eyes, and she felt as though there was something behind his eyes, something powerful that she needed. Something that had been lacking. Leaning forward in her pew, she gazed up at him, her soul thirsting for the message being delivered through him. "God, can you solve this dilemma I've put myself in?" She prayed silently. "How are you able to rescue me out of this? I've made so much trouble for myself. Show me the way out, I beg you." The minister gave his congregation a broad, all-encompassing smile. "Friends, neighbors," he said, holding up his arms. "We've come together today with great joy. Our songs and stories on this beautiful day all talk about the same thing, joy. We're told how angels sang over the earth on the night that Jesus Christ was born, how the whole night was illuminated by a dazzling star, and how all creation rejoices in the first coming of our holy King of Kings. We give gifts, we decorate our homes, we tell the whole world how happy we are that he came. It's a time for celebration with our families. A true time of joy. The minister paused, his eyes scanning the crowd, making sure they were taking it in. Yet in all this merriment, it's easy to lose sight of exactly why we're so happy. We celebrate far more than the birth of a baby. We celebrate our salvation from something terrible, from eternal punishment. Yes, we deserve death, all of us. None of us can escape our sins. Amanda stared at the minister, her heart pounding. That was how her lies felt to her, inescapable. They would pursue her everywhere she went, never letting her forget the mistakes she had made. The minister went on, describing how everyone was mired in sin, how its deadly grip was common to the whole of humankind. On our own strength, we can never get away from this. The minister shook his head. We can't earn our way to heaven or somehow flee from the presence of sin. It's everywhere, and it has its teeth into all of us. But when Jesus came, when that baby was born, he brought salvation from sin and death. He brought us all a clean slate. He gave us all the opportunity to receive the greatest gift of all, forgiveness. Forgiveness for all of our sins, no matter how awful they are. Amanda rested one hand on her heart. Lord, is it true? She prayed silently. Can you forgive me? Can you really forgive me for what I've done, and somehow fix my terrible mistakes? How can I get this forgiveness, Lord? The minister smiled as if he'd read her mind. We all want this forgiveness, he said softly. We're all seeking after freedom from our sins. And there's only one way we can get it. It's a free gift, but we have to do one thing in order to get our hands on it. Amanda's eyes were wide. She hung on his every word. There's a reason why I chose, "Oh, come all ye faithful," this morning instead of "Joy to the world," said the minister softly. For the answer to that question, how do we get saved, is in that song. Oh, come. Just come to him. Just come to his feet with everything in your heart, and he will set you free with a freedom that only he can give. Amanda lowered her head, aware that tears were splashing down her cheeks. Her prayer was silent, but she offered it with everything in her heart. Father, I'm here. I've come to you. Forgive me, God. I've done a terrible thing, and I know I sinned against Bina and Levi and the sheriff, and against you. Forgive me, Lord, wash away my sins, cleanse my iniquities, and Father. Oh, please, Father, give me the strength to do what I know I need to do. Chapter 9. Amanda's emotions, although not negative, had entangled themselves so thickly in her throat that as soon as the sermon was over, she hurried outside for some fresh air. She didn't want to faint in Levi's lap. Well, part of her did. Waking up gazing into his eyes was not an unattractive prospect, but the rest of her knew she needed some air. Standing on the stone steps of the church, she gripped a wrought iron handrail and took deep, steadying breaths as she gazed out into the street. The little town slumbered under a sky that had turned a lowering gray, promising snow soon. Despite the ominous weather, the atmosphere was one of muted cheer. There were holly wreaths hanging on all the doors, lightly dusted with fine snow. Candles blazed in every window. Amanda smiled, remembering the elaborate decorations back in Philadelphia. There was something so much simpler about everything out here in the West, and she felt a strange, raw purity in all that simplicity. Taking another breath, she realized that she wasn't as afraid as she had been to tell Levi and Bina the truth. She knew it would be hard, but she also knew she wasn't alone, and the realization was powerful. She was ready to tell Levi and Bina the truth as soon as they got home. Turning, she went to scan the crowds to find them, but something caught her eye. A face emblazoned deeply in the realm of her nightmares. She spun, and there he was, the man that had assaulted her. The man that had nearly killed her. He was just stepping out of the general store across the road, followed by a gang of others who shared many of his features: the stubble, the swagger, the thumbs hooked into belt loops. The scars. Amanda tried not to turn away too quickly, but it was like trying not to flinch back from a fire. She grabbed her bonnet, folding the brim over her face as much as she could, trying to hide. Her heart was hammering. Suddenly the sky seemed much closer, much darker. Suddenly those candles in the windows weren't shining bright enough. "As I live and breathe," gasped Leroy. "Did you see that?" "See what, boss?" asked Danny, pleasantly slack-jawed and slurring from their latest excursion to the saloon. Leroy's hand tightened on the packet of chewing tobacco he'd just casually shoplifted. "It's her," he hissed. "Her who?" said Danny on a cloud of alcohol fumes. Leroy grabbed his collar, yanking him closer, and hissed into his face. "That woman y'all thought it would be a good idea to rob, you drunken fool." Danny's eyes widened. "But she's dead, boss." "That's what you told me." Leroy pushed him aside. "You said we'd done enough damage before we were chased off that she'd never survive." "We did," protested Danny. "Clearly you're mistaken," snapped Leroy. "Because there she is. Look." He jutted out his chin, gesturing in the direction of a figure in a red checkered dress fleeing up the church steps. "It can't be," said another member of the gang. "Well, it is, ain't it?" said Leroy. He cracked his knuckles. "She's going to tattle on us to the sheriff. We'll all be in the calaboose for Christmas if we don't do something, and soon." "Got it, boss," said Danny, curling his fat fingers into two gigantic fists. He started toward the church, but Leroy slammed a hand down on his chest. "Don't be a fool," he said. "This ain't the way to do it. We'll have to be more quiet about it." As he spoke, the girl emerged from the church again. This time, she was white-faced and clinging to the arm of a strapping young man whose high cheekbones and night black hair marked him as a half-Indian. Leroy turned away, grinning to his group. "That's perfect," he said. "I know that half-breed. He stays on a ranch just out of town. We'll follow up them there, and when they're all snug and cozy for Christmas Eve, we'll waltz in there and slit their throats. It's Injun territory. Ain't nobody gonna ask questions about that." "I like it, boss," said Danny, his eyes glinting. "So do I," said Leroy. "Come on. Let's go." They headed off down the street, but unbeknownst to them, a jug-eared young man was watching them in horror from between the shelves of the general store. Amanda couldn't stop shivering, even though Levi had wrapped a wool blanket firmly around her shoulders. She tucked her hands closely around the cup of hot cocoa that Bina had set in front of her, trying to hide how much her hands were shaking. "Are you sure it was him, Lucy?" asked Levi, sitting down beside her. His eyes were more intense than ever. After days of not speaking much to her, his voice was like summer rain on her heart. "You were badly hurt that night. Maybe it was someone else." "I'm sure," Amanda croaked. "I'd know him anywhere." "It was him, Levi. I know it." "Don't you worry, Lucy," said Bina, leaning over from her other side to wrap her fingers securely around Amanda's wrist. "I sent one of the boys straight to the sheriff's house right before we left. I thought it'd be safest to bring you home." Amanda closed her eyes, trembling. "Maybe they won't come after me. I don't think they knew that I saw them." "We can't take that chance," said Levi. "But I'm sure the sheriff will be here in a few minutes. It's quite a long ride from town, and I made good time with our two big horses." His words were scarcely cold when there was a knock at the door. Amanda startled, and Levi jumped to his feet with an unnatural quickness. He grabbed the shotgun from the mantelpiece, carrying it effortlessly, like it was a part of him. Peering through the window first, his shoulders relaxed. "It's the sheriff," he said, going to open the door. "Sheriff Benson." That was quick. "What do you mean?" said the sheriff, raising his eyebrows. Levi hesitated. "Son, if you don't mind, let me come in," said the sheriff, glancing over his shoulder. Levi stepped back, closing the door securely behind the sheriff as he hurried into the kitchen. "We sent for you," said Levi. "But something tells me that you already knew we'd be needing your help." "I did," said the sheriff grimly. "It was Johnny who spotted them, a good-for-nothing gang that's been hanging out round town. They don't know I know who they are, but when Johnny saw them following you, He knew there was going to be trouble. He folded his arms. They have your house half surrounded, Levi. Johnny's guarding the door, but there's not much he can do. Why would they come after you? After me? Levi's shoulders slumped in an attitude of defeat. I don't think it's me being half Indian this time, Sheriff. Amanda had to clear her throat twice before she could speak. They're not coming after Levi, she said. They're coming after me. The sheriff's eyes widened. You mean? It's the men who attacked me, said Amanda. They've come back for me. She covered her mouth with one hand, trying to hold back a sob. They've come for me. Hush, sweet girl, said Bina, wrapping an arm around Amanda's shoulders. It's all right. They're not going to hurt you. Scoundrels, spat the sheriff, his mustache twitching with rage. Poor Lucy. To think that they would come after a good, married woman like this. Something deep inside Amanda snapped. Her tears dried up almost instantly, and she knew what she had to do. She raised her eyes to Levi's, her body shaking, praying that somehow, he would understand. I'm not married, she whispered. And my name's not Lucy. There was a moment of perfect silence. Levi's eyes widened, and in their dark depths, Amanda couldn't read his expression. Was he angry? Or was that hope, flickering somewhere deep inside? What are you talking about? Said the sheriff. I'm sorry. Amanda sagged back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. I lied to you. I've been lying to all of you, all this time, and all you've done is care for me. She swallowed hard. Why would you lie to us? Levi choked out. Because I was scared, said Amanda. I don't have a husband. I don't have a home in Philadelphia. I don't have anything or anyone. She looked up at him, her heart hammering in her ears. My name is Amanda Russell. I worked as a personal maid back in Philadelphia, but my mistress was jealous and cruel, and she accused me of stealing, which I didn't do. I had to get away. I signed up to become a mail-order bride, and I came out here to meet a man named Jack Smith. She swallowed thickly. I realize now that my mistress must have paid off the agency to lie to me so she could get rid of me. There's no Jack Smith. There's no future for me here or anywhere. So, you were alone at the train station, said the sheriff. And that's when they attacked you. Amanda nodded. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to trust. Luella, my mistress, she used to be my friend. I didn't know if I could trust you. Any of you. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed wholeheartedly. I'm so sorry. The silence from them was unbearable. Amanda wished someone would say something, anything. She looked up at Levi again. Please, she croaked. Try to forgive me. Levi opened his mouth, but whatever he said, the words were swallowed in a crack of gunfire. There was a scream from outside, and the sheriff leapt to his feet, yanking a six-shooter from his belt. Run, he shouted. Bina grabbed Amanda's hand, but it was already too late. The door swung open, and those men, the men who had attacked her, came swarming inside. The sheriff's gun blasted, but at the same moment a muzzle flashed somewhere in the crush of assailants, and the sheriff crumpled to the ground. Amanda saw the doorway, her passage to safety, and bolted. She just had enough time to see Levi swing his shotgun around, see it knocked from his hand, watch a fist thunder home to his temple, before they were upon her. And the last thing she knew was a rag pressed to her mouth and nose, the sharp smell of ether, then darkness. Chapter 10. Levi remembered sitting in this same armchair, watching a different patient with the same desperation, not so long ago. Only then it had been a girl, her golden hair fanned out on the pillow, her slender hands resting on her chest as she took small, shallow breaths with her broken ribs. Levi had thought, then, that her name was Lucy. Now he didn't know what to think. The sheriff stirred in his sleep, and a frown creased his already furrowed brow. Levi laid a hand on his arm. That's it, Sheriff, he said gently. Come on back to us. The sheriff's gray eyelashes fluttered. He peeled his eyes open, and they gazed unfocused at nothing for a few moments before settling on Levi. "There we are." Levi tried to smile. "It's good to have you back." "Levi," the sheriff croaked. "Don't try to talk too much. You took a bullet to your leg, and you lost a lot of blood," said Levi. "But you're going to be fine now. It'll take more than one stray bullet to put you down, Sheriff." The older man smiled. "It'll take more than a bullet wound to kill me, especially when you're my doc, Levi." It was the first time anyone had called him that besides his mother. To Levi's surprise, the echo of it rang down into his soul, sweet and beautiful. He liked it. "How's Johnny?" asked the sheriff. "He'll be fine, too," said Levi, smiling. The outlaws shot at him, but the bullet just grazed his shoulder. He went back to Santa Fe. "God bless the boy," said the sheriff fervently. He stirred, then winced, relaxing back onto his pillows. "What about Lucy? I mean, Amanda?" "They took her." Levi's voice grew dark. He was itching to go after her now that he knew the sheriff would live. "Those outlaws. They took her." "Leroy Olson, he's the leader of the gang," said the sheriff. He sucked at his teeth, his eyes worried. "We need a way to track them down. Johnny and I can't do it on our own." "But the townsfolk." Levi sighed. "They're not interested in helping us," he said. "You need to rest." "I've made my own arrangements." "What do you mean?" said the sheriff. "Don't worry. Just rest," said Levi. Levi made sure that the older man was comfortable before heading back downstairs into the kitchen, where Ma was busy cracking eggs into a pan. She was bustling around, her expression taut. Levi paused in the doorway, leaning against the frame as he stared at her. Ma must have felt his eyes on her, because she looked up. "How's the sheriff?" "Awake. And probably ready for those eggs." There were a few seconds of tense silence from Ma as she started to scramble the eggs in the pan with a wooden spoon. "She'll be back, you know," Ma said. "How can you know that?" He tried to keep the distress out of his voice, but his heart was hurting. "They took her, Ma. And I've got to go. The sheriff will make it now. I've got to go. She could be dead already." He curled his hand into a fist and thumped it on the kitchen table. "But I can't go after them yet. Not alone. I can't help her if I'm dead." "She'll be back, I feel it in my spirit," said Ma simply. "I prayed for her safety, and I know Amanda will return." She smiled. "It's Christmas, Levi. Try to remember what wonderful things the Lord has already done. He can do this, too." "I'm countin' on it," Levi murmured. "I pray so." Ma smiled, her features relaxing slightly. "I know so." Thunder rumbled in the distance. Ma peered through the window at the sunshine outside, frowning. "What's that?" "That," said Levi, jumping to his feet, "is how we're going to get Amanda back." Ma took the pan off the stove and followed him outside onto the porch. The snow was thick on the dirt, but the figures appearing on the distant horizon were moving fast, the flowing colors of spotted and pinto and buckskin horses moving as a mass of one. Ma gave a small gasp, and Levi laughed, putting an arm around her shoulders. "That's right, Ma," he said. "They've come." There was a whoop in the distance, and Ma laughed, tears filling her eyes. "My people," she said simply. The Apaches that had resettled a ways outside of town some years before charged up to the ranch house, their long legs gripping the bare sides of their horses, wild hair streaming in the wind as they arrived in a mass of thundering hooves and war paint and battle cries. Tomahawks and rifles flashed in their hands, for jerkins fluttered open over bare chests painted for battle. They milled around for a moment before a white horse came forward, its hooves touching the dirt as lightly as if it was made of air. Its rider wore a feathered headdress that poured down his back. His eyes were set deep in the crinkled recesses of his face, emphasized with war paint. "D'Anzo, Levi," said the chief, his voice rumbling like the hooves of his horses. "Nantan," said Levi, stepping forward. "Thank you for coming." "You are our blood," said Nantan. He raised his chin. "Your father cared for our sick and raised our orphans." His eyes darted to Ma. "You are family. You need our help." "A gang of outlaws have captured a young woman who stayed with us," said Levi. "She needs rescued. I don't know where they've taken her, or what they've done with her. I just know that the townsfolk of Santa Fe won't help me." "We will help," said Nantan simply. He turned to one of the younger braves. "Find them," he ordered. "I'm coming," Levi declared, starting to follow him. "No," Nantan said. "You'll slow them down. You wait here with me." Levi forced himself back to the porch. Nantan was right. The braves would be faster without him. The braves nodded to their chief and dismounted from their horses, hurrying to inspect the disturbed snow. There was a splash of blood in front of the porch where Johnny had fallen. Nantan turned back to Levi, his jaw clenched. "We will find out where they took her," he said. "And then we will come back for you." It seemed to take an age for the Apache to search for Amanda. Levi tried not to worry, tried not to stare out at the horizon, tried to help his mother with the Christmas dinner she was cooking. "Amanda will be hungry when she gets back," Ma said. Levi just got in the way, so he went into the barn and groomed the horses. Milked the cow. Fed the pig. It wasn't feeling very much like Christmas. Yet as Levi worked, trying to calm himself with the barn chores he'd been doing since he was a little boy, he did feel as though he'd been given something. The moment that the sheriff had called him doctor, it had changed something in his heart. He had realized just how deeply he felt called to helping people the way he'd helped Sheriff Benson and Lucy. Amanda. Terror gripped him. If they couldn't find her, how would he ever tell her that he had forgiven her? Finally, there was a yipping cry from outside, and Levi raced out of the barn to see two braves on foot running up to where Nantan waited on the porch of the ranch house. The chief rose quickly from his chair, hurrying over to greet the braves where they flew across the snow, light and effortless on their moccasins. "We found them," said the first brave, not even breathless despite the distance he'd been running. "On the riverbank," said the second. A gang of outlaws, drinking and celebrating. Levi had reached them now, breathless with hope. "And the woman," he said in Apache. "Did you see her?" The braves seemed mildly startled by his fluent command of the language, but the first one answered him quickly. "Yes. She's bound but is unhurt." Levi glanced up at Nantan, who nodded. "Now, you will go with us." "Let's get her," he said. In the time it took Levi to saddle one of his wagon horses and scramble onto its broad back, the troop of Apaches had already assembled, their weapons at the ready. A strange, ancient thrill ran through Levi's veins as he steered his ungainly horse up to where Nantan was sitting on his white horse, his position so fluid and comfortable that it was as if the animal were a part of him. They headed out, the horses moving at a brisk canter, crushing frosted sagebrush beneath their hooves. Levi's heart was in his throat as he knotted a finger into the carthorse's mane, the lumbering creature struggling to keep pace. "There are many outlaws, Chief," said one of the braves. "We're greatly outnumbered." Levi was too breathless and too consumed with worry to speak Apache. "We'll have to find a way to beat them without numbers," he declared against the cool wind. "Or maybe you won't." The voice that called out from somewhere behind them stopped the Apache in their tracks. Snow and dirt sprayed up against the horses' legs as they slithered to a halt, the warriors brandishing their tomahawks. Levi struggled to will his ungainly cart horse around, grasping for his shotgun with his free hand. There was a gang of riders behind them, men in Stetsons and large leather saddles, carrying guns and looking ready to fight. Levi's heart flipped, until the man at the head of the gang lifted his head. Instead of Leroy Olson's ice-blue eyes, a wide, gap-toothed grin shone out at Levi from under the shadow of the hat. "Johnny?" Levi gasped. "Were you going in such a hurry, Mr. Fletcher?" drawled Johnny, puffing up his chest to show off his shiny little deputy badge. "We have tracked down Leroy Olson's men and the woman," boomed Nantan. "We are going to free her." Johnny looked momentarily intimidated by the imposing chief. Levi's heart sank as he gazed at the group of men riding behind the young deputy, ranchers and businessmen and cowboys. They were all the ordinary folk of Santa Fe, folk that had been throwing slurs at him and his mother and this tribe since before Levi was born. Were they going to try to stop him? "Well," said Johnny, "it seems to me that you're all a little outnumbered by Olson's men." Levi swallowed, trying to read the young man's intentions, but Johnny's gaze was clear and steady. "That's why we've all come together to help you." Levi felt as though his world was tipping. "What? It's not right, a good young woman like that being taken by those outlaws," said a grizzled old rancher. "You saved our sheriff, young man. And we haven't always been the best neighbors to you." "It's time we made it right," piped up the baker, cradling his six-shooter as he sat in the saddle. Levi's heart was pounding. Suddenly, it had never felt more like Christmas. He couldn't stop himself from laughing as he raised his shotgun. "Let's ride," he cried. And as one, Apache and white man echoed the words together. "Let's ride." Chapter 11. Amanda's wrists ached where the harsh rope had been pulled tight around them. She tried to move her stiff shoulders, but Leroy had bound her so tightly that she could barely move. Sneaking a glance sideways, she hated how close he was to her. He lounged by the fire, propped up against a rock, picking his teeth with a matchstick as he gazed into the flames. The crackle of the fire and the gentle rush of the river nearby couldn't mask the drunken snores of some of the gang members, who were scattered on their bedrolls all around the camp. Leroy, however, was sober, and for all his relaxed demeanor, his eyes were sharp and glittering when he looked over at Amanda. She ducked her head, heart pounding. Leroy laughed. "What are you looking at, darling?" Amanda swallowed. There was fear in her gut, yet it didn't seem able to reach her heart. "Lord, if I die today, at least I'll know that I told the truth at last," she prayed silently. "And besides, maybe being killed by this posse is better than looking into Levi's eyes and knowing that he will never forgive me." "You can stare all you want, pretty little lady." Leroy sat up, reaching out a hand toward her. Amanda instinctively pulled her head away, but her legs were bound, so she couldn't do anything more to avoid Leroy's rough fingertips brushing across her neck and cheek. "It's been a while since you saw a real man, hasn't it?" Somewhere in the woods surrounding the riverbank, a twig snapped. Leroy pulled back, and for a moment, his eyes scanned the woods harshly. Amanda took a breath, but it was only seconds before Leroy was reaching out for her again. "You ain't used to what a real man looks like." "Levi Fletcher is a real man," said Amanda, her voice shaking but sure. "That half-breed?" Leroy sneered. Amanda was trembling, but she raised her eyes to Leroy's. "He's twice the man you'll ever be," she hissed. Leroy's eyes darkened. She heard metal hiss in a sheath, and the next moment, a blade was pressed to her neck. Leroy's fingers grasped her hair and yanked her head back. She could only just maintain her defiant stare into his eyes as the sharp edge scraped against her skin. "You better watch your words, Missy," Leroy hissed. "Or I might have to." "Stop." Levi's voice was the sweetest sound Amanda had ever heard. Leroy's hand disappeared from her hair, the knife falling away from her throat. She gasped in a huge breath, and there he was, Levi. Standing at the edge of the campsite, his blazing eyes more intent than ever, his big hands held up, empty and palm out. "Stop," said Levi again, more quietly this time. "Levi!" Amanda screamed. Leroy's hand shot out almost automatically, slapping her in the mouth. She fell to her knees, spitting blood. When she could look up again, every outlaw in the gang had his weapon trained on Levi's chest, but he hadn't wavered. He kept his eyes on Amanda. Leroy gave a slow, barking laugh as he casually flipped the barrel of his pistol in Levi's direction. Well, he said. "What's this, then?" "I don't want any trouble," said Levi, not looking away from Amanda. "Sure don't look like it, boy," said Leroy. "I'm just here for the woman." Levi's voice was level. "Hand her over, and I'll be on my way." Leroy laughed again. Or else what, half-breed, he growled. You have some nerve coming into our camp like this alone. Oh, said Levi, very softly, but I'm not alone. There was a beat of silence, and Amanda saw Leroy's eyes widen. Then Levi moved, quick as a deer. He cupped his hands over his mouth, threw back his head and let loose a war cry, a wild, echoing, yipping thing, a sound that was filled with blood and violence, a sound that rose up like the howl of a wolf and thundered across the expanse of the prairie like the droning approach of a buffalo herd. Chills flew down Amanda's spine, and that was when they came bursting down from the riverbank above. In mere seconds, the bank was bristling with arrows, with the barrels of guns, with tomahawks and knives alike. Shoot them! Shoot them! Leroy yelled, raising his own pistol. Get 'em, boys! But the boys had frozen, and Amanda couldn't blame them. Shoulder to shoulder, white man and Apache stared down into the camp, armed to the teeth and ready to do battle. The gang was helplessly outnumbered and caught off guard. Shoot them! Leroy shrieked. The outlaw nearest Amanda shook his head. Slowly, he crouched down, holding up his free hand, and laid his weapon down on the beach. The rest of the men followed. That's it, howled Johnny's voice, wildly overexcited. Stick 'em up, you outlaws. Levi said nothing, but his eyes were trained on Amanda, and she saw them shine with triumph. Despite her swelling lip, she realized she was grinning. All right. All right, said Leroy. He put down his own pistol and held up his hands. You've got me. Then he moved. Amanda saw it coming, but she couldn't get away. One of Leroy's arms wrapped around her shoulders, enveloping her in his unwashed, fruity stench. The other seized a second knife from his belt, and then the blade was on her throat again, and this time it had drawn blood. She could feel it coursing down her throat. She was going to die now, and she knew it, but she fixed her eyes on Levi Fletcher because knowing that he had forgiven her was enough. The gunshot rang out, a deafening crack in the tense silence. Amanda felt something zip past her face. She screwed her eyes tightly shut, waiting for the impact and whatever came next. But there was no pain. Instead, there was just a weight flopping off her shoulders, and then a quiet thump. Amanda. Amanda. Levi's hands had grabbed her arms. She snapped her eyes open, and he was right there in front of her, holding her, his eyes wide, his heart pumping so hard that she could feel it in her own chest where he pressed against her. Amanda, are you all right? He gasped. Amanda wanted to cry and sing and scream all at once. Instead, she just leaned into him, feeling his big fingers run down to her bonds to loosen them. I've never been better, she whispered. And it was true. Chapter 12. Ma set the pork roast down in the middle of the table, which was already groaning with food. There, she said, standing back to admire her handiwork. I told you we'd all be home for Christmas lunch. You did, Ma, said Levi, taking her hand and smiling up at her. And you were right. Things couldn't have turned out any better. Sheriff Benson, sitting across from Levi, gave a contented grin as he laced his fingers across his belly and gazed down at his empty plate. Amanda better not take long, because I'm starving. Oh, you. Ma chided, swatting at the sheriff with a dishcloth. The poor girl just needs to change into some nice clean clothes, then she'll be right here. She's had a long day. Not as long as Leroy Olson's gang will be having, said the sheriff. Johnny took great pleasure in dragging them all back to the jailhouse, helped by all of your friends, of course. Apache and otherwise. They'll stand trial after Christmas, and I don't think none of them are going to be bothering good folk ever again. Olson certainly ain't, said Levi. I have to say, that young Johnny sure surprised me, said the sheriff. I didn't know he was such a good shot. You trained him well, Sheriff, said Levi, smiling. Well, your father trained you well, too, Levi. The sheriff smiled. He squirmed in his seat, struggling to reach his pocket, and extracted a folded slip of paper. I think you'll find he trained you even better than you thought, if you'd read this. Johnny told me to give it to you from the townsfolk. What is it? asked Levi, taking it. Just read it. Levi unfolded the note. It was written in a careful, educated hand. Mr. Fletcher. Your father served us well, and despite our rejection, so have you. It would be a wonderful Christmas gift to the people of Santa Fe if you would accept our request for you to become our doctor. Sincerely yours. The bottom of the paper was covered in signatures, too many for Levi to recognize. He looked up at the sheriff, his eyes misting over. Ma had read the note over his shoulder, and she gave a quiet sob of joy. Oh, Levi, she whispered. Your father would be so proud. I'm going to make him even prouder, Levi said around the knot in his throat. So, you accept, said the sheriff, beaming. Of course, I do. Accept what? The sweet voice made Levi start to his feet, and there she was in the doorway, lit up by candlelight that fell around her like a golden halo. Amanda's hair streamed over her shoulders, richly vibrant. Her hazel green eyes were wide and luminous and magnetic. Levi didn't realize he was crossing the floor until he was beside her, taking his hands in her own. I accept, he croaked, his eyes lost in hers. How good God has made my future. He cleared his throat. I hope you'll allow me to make you a part of it. Amanda said nothing, but her eyes were dancing. He reached up, his rough hand slipping behind her head, and pulled her close. And when he kissed her, the length of her body against his, her lips moving on his with an answering gentleness, Levi knew. He had found his Christmas love. The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Susanna Calloway. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Susanna Calloway, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Susanna Calloway Western romance.